the debt ceiling has been handled. We had recently quite a debate between the Republican-led House and the sane people in the United States as to whether or not we would pay the bills that Trump racked up. Ironically, it was Trump supporters in Congress that didn't want to pay Trump's bills. After a lengthy negotiation, Kevin McCarthy, leader of House Republicans, was convinced not to destroy the country's credit in exchange for running the country just a little bit worse. And he had begun trying to get it run a lot worse, including getting rid of your Social Security and other nightmare scenarios. Well, here's if you want to find out what's going on in the United States, a great source for that is to find out what the British Broadcasting Company has to say about it. Here's the BBC. The article is, of course, linked in the description. You want to have a read yourself. But that is why we share the screen. Let's have a gander, huh? Who is this by? Who's the actual author? I couldn't see that on there. I guess staff. All right. What's in the U.S. debt ceiling deal? Wow. Apparently, I'm from Virginia all of a sudden. Debt ceiling suspended until 2025. Oh, we may as well read the introductory paragraph. Voting on the bill, the only part I care about, the text of which was posted to a congressional website, is set to start later this week in the House and Senate. Debt ceiling suspended until 2025 every so often. Yeah, we know about that. They're explaining to their audience how it works. But in recent years, this has become increasingly difficult because the two sides cannot agree on the terms. Let me be clear. It's not because the two sides can't agree. It's because one side started using it as a hostage. Republicans have made it clear that they are willing to tank our country. They've already resulted in the U.S. Having its credit rating downgraded. They use this and things like it as hostages. That is why this is happening, not because there's a disagreement on political philosophy. This allows them to pay their bills until the date and know that the next fight over raising the ceiling will not interfere with the presidential election. So, 2024, we talk about how, a month is an eternity in politics. A year and a half, no one's going to remember this. No, the average American certainly won't remember it. And the rest of the world, says an ally of ours, can breathe a sigh of relief if the deal is signed, because a U.S. default would have a global impact. What the hell? Impact. Caps on spending, but not defense. Of course. We got to keep our war machine going. Never mind that we just got out of a 20-year war. So it would make sense to spend less on our military. No. We gotta buy more tanks. Buy more missiles. What if we want to do some killing? That's obviously our priority. Republicans wanted to freeze on overall spending for 10 years with a rise in defense spending and cuts to other budgets. They want us to be a nation which just worships death. The agreement keeps non-defense spending flat next year with a 1% rise in 2025. Oh, good. Like that 1%. Nice. The implications of this belt tightening is as yet unclear. I mean, it's going to hurt every American a little bit, is the short answer. Defense spending would increase to $886 billion, which amounts to a 3% rise on this year. There are no budget caps after 2025. The White House estimates government spending would be reduced at least $1 trillion, according to the AP News, but official calculations have not yet been released. Folks, that's not good. The government is spending less money. That means we're getting less service out of them. Billionaires will love that. They can afford a private version of all these services. They can afford private police, private doctors, which is the only thing we're allowed to have in the United States. They can afford, if they wanted, a private military. They really, really want it. But why would they? The U.S. military already serves their interests, so they can afford private roads. They can afford private land for farming if they really want to do that. They only benefit. It's us that suffer. So good job, Republicans. You've won. Unspent COVID funds returned. With the public health emergency officially ended in May, Republicans had argued for the relief funds that were not spent to be returned. Imagine, though, if you're off work because you had permanent lung damage due to COVID. What do you do? Well, if you were relying on these funds, if you were relying on your state doling them out in small payments over a long amount of time, now you get a new entire career. Now you go to the poorhouse. Welfare tinkered with, but no. To be honest, that's not a huge deal to me. The unspent COVID funds, those I just want to be fair here. The states that had not yet spent them, to my knowledge, did not have a plan to spend them. So, welfare tinkered with, but no overhaul. A central demand of Republicans was to toughen up the distribution of welfare benefits. Toughen up doesn't mean make them stronger. It means make them harder to access. They wanted people who have a problem with life already, a problem getting through life, to have a harder time getting funds needed to survive. They're not good people, Republican politicians. You should be upfront about that. You should be informed about that at the very least. By attaching strings that would mean able-bodied recipients having to work to get food and health care help. The issue being most people, if they can work, choose to. If only for the pride of it. Democrats were adamant this should not be on the table. The welfare being looked at by Republicans included Medicaid, of course, health coverage for poor Americans, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and temporary assistance for needy families, TANF. Medicaid remains untouched in the deal, but the age at which work requirements are included for those SNAP was raised from 50 to 54. So if you're 50, let's say you're 52 years old, and you're exhausted, and you're just trying to eat, and you could not get hired because something is wrong with you. It is your personal flaw. You have a flaw, and something's wrong with you, and you could not get hired. You don't eat. On top of your other problems, on top of whatever, let's just take the Republican view. Whatever made it so that you couldn't get hired. Now you're also starving. Funds to enforce tax rules on wealthy Americans. Look at this. A win for Democrats was securing $80 billion for a decade. Okay, for a decade. $80 billion for a decade. $80 billion a year. I'd love that, but $80 billion for a decade. Okay, $8 billion a year. To help the Internal Revenue Service to enforce the tax code in last year's Inflation Reduction Act on the richest. Fun fact, if Sam Cedar is correct, and I've yet to see him not be, every dollar spent on the IRS returns $6. So in other words, if you spend $80 billion over 10 years in the IRS, you get back $480 billion. So what the Democrats had to fight to get in there was rules that simply was funding that simply enforced the existing rules that the rich are supposed to be following. That's all it does, and it generates $480 billion, and they had to fight for that. They had to fight to get America an extra $400 billion over 10 years. There was objection to this. In other words, analysis. The Republicans wanted to dump the $80 billion in IRS funding, claiming it would be used to hire an army of agents to audit Americans. Yeah, rich Americans. Americans that are definitionally a drain on society. If they're rich, it means they've taken more than they've given. That's how it goes. The agency said it would also be used to modernize the system. Instead, in showcasing his deal-making skills, President Biden agreed to cut $20 billion, but divert the cash to other non-defense spending. Easier to get energy project permits. New rules will make it easier for both fossil fuel, Christ, and renewable energy, good, projects to get licenses. Although, is it good? Why is it hard to get a license? What regulations are they trying to get around? Regulations like don't dump chemicals into the drinking water. Regulations like, I'm just spitballing here, don't choke the air with pollutants because the town next to you doesn't want cancer. What regulations? How do they want it to be easier to get a license? Why did it need to be easier? Why couldn't the people who wanted the license fulfill the obligations we had in place? They could. It's just cheaper to thieve from us and to make us to offset all costs instead of paying to build a facility which can safely dispose of waste. They instead say we can pay for cancer treatment. Analysis. This is a win and a loss for a White House. Both parties agree it takes far too long for new energy infrastructure to be built. I don't know why. I don't agree with that. But disagree on what projects should be prioritized. Because there are those of us that want to use a 150-year-old energy source because they've been bribed by people that produce that energy source. Republicans want more gas pipelines and fossil fuel projects, a finite resource which will run out eventually, and so long as we need it, we are weaker. Democrats want more clean energy, also known as building an infrastructure that will last in the future. Taking the free energy available every single day, we are not in a closed system, the sun adds energy to our system. We could choose to harness it, but we don't because billionaires with fossil fuel companies have bribed our politicians. And a whole lot of dummies are just so gullible that they support these people. This could be another red line for progressive Democrats. It is. Things not in the deal. All kinds of things. All kinds of things. Republicans had wanted Biden to plan to forgive student debt to be rescinded, but it's the Biden plan to forgive student debt to be rescinded, but it survived. For what it's worth, that was a relatively unambitious plan, although it was better than nothing to deal with this student debt. We should forgive it all, and that should be that. Tax hikes. Democrats had targeted wealthy Americans for new tax hikes. Good. But there are no new taxes here. Bad. Analysis. House Democrats will be fuming about this, rightly so. They were already critical that the White House did not make taxes on the rich and powerful the centerpiece of their talks, as they should be. If that was the main talking point, then we would have Republicans out there trying to defend taxing the rich more. Wouldn't that look great for the average American? Making Republicans have to dance and defend people like Elon Musk for being a billionaire. Is there a better time in America to examine why we allow there to be billionaires? Has Elon Musk not shown that the concept of a billionaire, of somebody that much richer than us, not somebody richer than the average person, not somebody even filthy rich, but somebody with the wealth of a nation. We got Elon Musk out there. Does he look like he should have the wealth of a nation? No, he's I think knucklehead might actually be some sort of a slur. I'm not sure. He's a nincompoop. How about that? He deserves no respect. Certainly, you could argue he probably shouldn't even be a rich guy at all. I've met folks that flip hamburgers for a living who seem to have more sense than this guy, but certainly he shouldn't be a billionaire. And what a time to be out there saying we should tax people like this more, because in order for that guy to have a yacht, you live in a one-room apartment. Because he's offset all of the costs he has for doing business onto you. But no, we're not going to have that conversation, apparently. Clean energy. Republicans had wanted to repeal key provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy and climate provisions, but it was unscathed. Republicans want to hold us back. They want to make America weaker. They want to make Americans weaker. And they certainly want to make the bosses of Americans stronger, with more influence over their lives. That's what they want. That's what they're trying to do. That's what they were partially successful in doing. This does not go away until we vote them out. Give this summary to everyone you can. Share the BBC article to everyone you can. It's a great breakdown. We have to be proselytizing. I think that's the word. Evangelizing. That, I think, it does work. We have to be evangelizing to every single person we can. The era of nonsense has to end. If you got a different idea than me for how things ought to be, that's fine. But it has to be a serious one. This pretending like climate change doesn't exist or that we're going to be using fossil fuels at all in 50, 60 years, that has to end. Because the worst case scenario for Republicans is we do what they want. And we're still shoveling coal into trains while Japan, China, and everybody else has bullet trains that run on good vibes. And we're a backward nation that has chosen to be. And incidentally, we're poor, all of us, and in constant debt to foreign billionaires, who we will be forced to call our betters. In other words, undoing everything that the USA said it wanted to be about. Let's see what you all have to say. Primaries, 2024.